Oh, we're back, and we have a new guest with us. We finally brought in the brains of the operation, or I should say one of the brains of the operation, right? Travis, I'm gonna need your help. We're gonna start with you, and let's introduce the crew we have today. We have, well, we start with Joe. Go back to you, Travis, for a second. Let's go back to Travis. There's Travis. He's got a very like that's a
It's already
look.
It's already Christmas time.
Oh, really? I didn't know they were doing that already.
I love it. He's in the Singular studio. And now let's go around. Let's bring in the well, familiar faces. We'll start with Catherine. Travis is going to cut over to Catherine. No, I get okay, let's go over to Suzanne.
Tiny.
Hello.
And I think I see your dog in the background, which I
Yeah,
like.
today we're joined by the lovable Simba.
This is good. We like to have a little fun with Singular. Show you some of our wacky little things in the background. Oh, your dog's not wacky, but we like him. And now, without further ado, we bring in Thomas Molden. Thomas and I, there he is. There he is. I'm really excited to have Thomas on a stream, and we're going to be seeing more of Thomas because I can tell you that Suzanne and myself are paired up with Thomas quite a bit doing some advanced compositions. And when I say advanced compositions, I mean you've built a composition, it's doing all those amazing things that you want it to do, or at least we hope it is. And then you want to add another level of control, another level of flexibility to really unleash some amazing power of Singular. And that's when you get into composition scripting. So we're familiar with the composition. And on top of it, or I should say in addition to it, we have a whole JavaScript composition scripting functionality, which is absolutely amazing. Again, Thomas and I and Suzanne and Thomas have used it to great effect for a number of different customers. So again, if you need to bring in data or you need to manipulate your composition in a manner that is, oh gosh, I'll say anything from high-end broadcasters to professional level streaming, and you need that extra level of control. That's what we use composition scripting for. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to show you the ability to take a text, and we're going to take that text, and we are going to use the data entry in Singular in a Singular control app, and then we're going to take the text that we enter into there. We're going to bring it through a script. We're going to inject that data that you've entered, the text, and we're going to wrap it in HTML and then use Singular to present it on the output. So, and I heard today, that's why when we first started this, I was like, well, where's the composition? Where are we building? Mr. Thomas Molden is going to start from the beginning. I mean, because we've got him here. I'm really excited to have you here, Thomas. I am going to ask Travis, if you don't mind, I guess let's jump right over to Thomas's screen share. And then we will build a composition from the ground up. Oh, we have, oh, look, I didn't see this. I apologize. We have a little overview. That's going to be Catherine. Take it away, Catherine.
Well, actually, Thomas is going to take it away because this is very foreign to me.
Okay, I can jump into it. Composition scripts are one element and one part of the Singular APIs and SDKs that you can use to bring Singular as a development platform into your projects. So not only showing nice overlays that are animated, you can add logic with the APIs and SDKs, and composition script is one big component within that. So today, it's the first time that we officially present it in a bigger audience. And this little diagram shows and it gives shows an idea, shows you where composition scripts are actually located. So the blue elements indicate the composition, which is the root composition. And the root composition can have various subcompositions. So there is the lower third at the bottom, and there is a side panel on the right. And each of the subcompositions has widgets, which then actually are the visual elements within the overlay, like text, rectangles, images, and any other widgets. The composition script now can be attached on various parts of the Singular composition. As you see, there is one in the middle that says root. So that's a composition script which is attached to the root of the composition itself. Then there, you see on the left and on the bottom, some composition scripts. They are called subcomposition scripts. So they are linked to those specific subcompositions. Then there is a global one and an overlay one. So we're going to have a look into that in a few minutes, in a few seconds. Then subcomposition scripts and composition scripts, they have access to any element within the subcomposition. They can access widgets, can access control nodes, can read control nodes, update control nodes. We're all going to see that. And they can communicate with each other, which is very beneficial for more complex and advanced use cases. So what do you need for composition scripts? Composition scripts are JavaScripts that are executed within the overlay and on the output itself. So you need a bit of JavaScript. Then what you also might need is, especially in our case, some very little HTML and very little CSS. So it's good to have some web development or some web knowledge in the background. Some good resources, and we'll add the link then later into the chat, are the w3schools.com, which is a comprehensive platform that tells you everything about composition, about web technology in general. And then the netninjas.co.uk, that's a website. They also have a YouTube channel that explains in a very easy to understand way everything about well, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what you need to know. So just have a look at the entry courses, at the basic courses, and you'll be up and running with Singular composition scripts right away. So now let me share my screen, and I'll share this one. So what are we going to build today? Let's have a look at the result first. So we are going to build this composition. Well, it doesn't look that complicated, and when I start building it, it's actually very easy. So this composition script, there is one lower third, so I can animate it in and out. And you have two control nodes there. One where you can enter a first name. The first name is displayed in the regular font. The second name is displayed in a bold font. So now what you can see that both are, well, following each other, and there is a colored background behind them. So now let me just change the first name to first and the last name to last. And what you see, what happens there, is the background of the two text elements. It scales with the text, and well, every element every character that I enter into the first name control node is regular, and what I enter into the second name is displayed in bold. So that's what we're going to build, and we're going to build it right from the scratch. So, my friends, let's start. I'll add a new composition, and I name the composition, let's call it the auto follow text. So you all know the Singular composer. And the way we build compositions and we structure them is using subcompositions. So that's my lower third subcomposition, which I add here. And within the lower third, I'll add my text. I'll turn on the bounding box. Most of the time I turn on the bounding box. It gives me a bit better impression of dimensions, where the text is and how it looks like. So within the text, then I'm just setting the alignment to center. And that's actually almost everything I need. From the widgets and from the composition structure. I'm going to add two control nodes, one for my first name, and the other one is our last name. So into the first name, I'll say that's my first name. And to the last name, I'll enter last name. So now what you all know is how you can link the text property of the text widget to a control node. And there you can see I can either link it to my first name or to my last name, but not to both to each other. So we don't link any of those. So as mentioned before, and Stephen already said that in the introduction, is that we're going to combine the composition script with some HTML. And the HTML properties can directly enter into the text widget. So the text widget has some HTML properties. And they will add a link to a support portal article, which you can look at, and that tells a little bit more about the HTML functionality of the text widget. So all what you need to do to enter HTML is use the open HTML tag at the beginning. And now you see it's you'll see the HTML tag there, and add the close HTML tag at the end. And as soon as I have defined that, all tags, all HTML tags are gone, and you'll just see the text in between. So what I'll do is I'll just set this text widget to light so that we can better see the difference. And now what I'll define is I'll enter just two parts of text. It's my first and my last name. So within the HTML, now I can use the bold text to style the last name, and I use the close bold tag to close it. So that in case I want to enter anything at the end, that this is using the predefined font settings of the text widget itself. So now, next thing, what we want to do is we want to style the background a little bit. So therefore, I'll add a span tag at the beginning, and at the very end, I'll close the span tag. There we go. You don't see any difference because it doesn't add any visual element. But now I define an inline style for for the span, and I'll style the background. And the background gets a color. Let's make it green. There we go. So now we already have a green color. And because it's HTML and it's standard CSS, you can use all style elements, all style properties that CSS provides you. You can define the HTML color names. Let's see how the crimson looks like. So that's a kind of red. Or you can use, of course, the hex color codes for styling the background and defining that. So what I've also added a little bit, because the background is pretty narrow at the beginning and at the end. So I'll add a little padding, and I'll define the padding. Well, top and bottom is okay, so that's 0 pixels, and left and right. Let me see how does this look with 20 pixels, a little bit better. I'll add some more, 40 pixels. So now there is some space on the left and on the right side. So that's already pretty good. So we've defined basically, and we've styled the text how we want that we want to use within our text element. Now the next thing what we need to do is when we look at how do we get these two text control nodes, how can we ingest those ones here into the HTML that we've prepared there. So,
hey, Thomas, I'm going to jump in for a second to give you a 2-second break and just explain. I think Thomas covered this very well. And I think really one of the amazing things you have here is Thomas is prepping HTML formatted text right inside of Singular. And as you can see, it's ignoring the tags, but he's also combining, as we can do in Singular. For example, the font is being set by Singular. The font is set to light. He's got the justification centered. So it's sort of a combination between Singular handling the formatting of the text and HTML. And I think the really powerful thing is here, right, because we can take the HTML text entered into the text property, the text property within the text widget, that's what he's typing in, you really can get it set up. And just setting the table, the next piece, as Thomas walked you through, is to, okay, so that's great. No one's going to type in HTML text, as we know, into the text control node to get that. Although, Thomas, what you could do here is if you copy that and paste that into the control node, and just to make my point. So effectively,
okay, yeah. Let me make the multi-line control node and call this HTML text. Here we go. Copy, and when I paste it there, I can link it to my HTML text. So
okay, and the reason I wanted Thomas to do that in this example is because it's pretty obvious. No one is going to be typing in HTML text that's going to be maybe operating graphics, a whole list of names on lower thirds. So the next piece to the puzzle is, how do we, in a composition script, not have to eliminate the need to type in the HTML and basically inject what we've typed in the first name, last name control nodes into the HTML in a script. So I'll just set the table to explain that. And I think, Thomas, you've done a great job of explaining this and showing the users where you can actually see what the HTML is going to be displayed as. You're entering it in one way. So now we're going to get the composition script to take care of that. I don't know if I want to call it the busy work of converting it from HTML into beautiful text.
Okay.
And background.
So I'll unlink this text property, because this is exactly what we are going to set then from the composition script. Let's say that's my first name and the last name. So we'll keep it very simple. Okay, composition scripts. How do you enter the composition script editor? That's actually very, very easy. There is a little icon that you can click on. So by clicking on it, it brings up, it opens up a new browser tab with your composition. You see the preview on the upper right, and it looks pretty similar like the composer. It's just organized and arranged a little different. So you'll have your structure and your subcompositions down there with all the control nodes, and you'll get some more information with this editor, especially, let's say, the payload. This is interesting because there you'll see exactly the name which we later have to use within the composition to identify that, in this case, the name and the last name. So now, what type of compositions do we have? We have an overlay a script. What type of compositions? Type of composition scripts. We have a global script. There is a script for the root composition and a script for each of the subcompositions that we have that we've built in our composition. We also can add a script. We've prepared a library of scripts, boilerplates for each of the script types. And I'm just going to add that by selecting the script and just loading the boilerplate. And what you notice just by clicking through them, there are some difference there. The overlay script, let's start with this one. The overlay script is a script that defines the dialogue between the overlay itself and the player controls when you embed the overlay within a player. So it does a messaging back and forth. We're not going to use that here, so I just delete it and close it. The global script, it's a special script, and it hosts global functions, your library functions that you might need throughout your compositions on various locations. And you also can define lookup tables, like well, the team tables, team colors, team logos, and things like that. You manage it within the global script, and then the global script can make it available to all your subcompositions, to lower thirds, to side panels, to full screen graphics within your composition. When we look at the structure of the script, so the script, it has an init function and it has a close function. The init function is called when it's initialized. The close function is called when the overlay is closed. On the init function, the global script gives you access to the context object. That's where you can store global data or make global functions available to other subcompositions. We are not going to use it in this case, so I'll close it and remove it. So now there is the root composition and the lower third composition script left. And as you see, when I just go from one to the other, there is no difference. Well, there is no difference between the root composition and the subcomposition. It's exactly the same. Well, the only difference is that when you look down here, that the subcomposition, it has a parent. The root composition doesn't have a parent. But apart from that, it's exactly the same. In our example, we don't need the root composition script, so I'm going to remove it. So now let's have a closer look at the subcomposition script for our lower third. So what you see there is also an init function and also a close function. We're going to look at the init function. The init function returns two objects. One is the composition object that gives you access to all properties and all widgets and all data within the lower third subcomposition. That's where the composition is, where the composition script is defined on. The context object, we saw that in the global script. It gives access to all global lookup tables and global functions that are defined within the global script. We don't use that here, but we're going to have a close look into the composition object. Okay, the boilerplate down there defines some functions already for us. It defines some listeners and callbacks that we can react on. There is the message callback. The message callback is very, very useful for interactive overlays. So this is called, for example, when you have a mouse over, a mouse in, a mouse out, a mouse out, a mouse down, a mouse up event. So this, you'll get a callback in here. Well, we don't use interactivity here, just delete it. The next callback is a state change callback. The state change callback is called whenever the animation state of the subcomposition is changing. Well, what are the animation states? The subcomposition has by default an animation, and it's a fade-in animation. With two states, there is the in state where you can see it, and there is the out state where it's off. And whenever this animation state changes, you'll get a callback there, which means that depending on the animation of a specific subcomposition, you can animate in another one, or highlight a color, or just do some logic within your composition script. We don't do that, so let me remove that here. The next one is interesting. And this is one we're going to look into in detail. So I'll skip it for now and directly jump to the data node payload changed event. Well, you all know that within Singular you can define global data, so-called data nodes within your account, and then push data from a data service into this global data nodes. And whenever the data node, which is defined or attached to a subcomposition, changes, you'll get a callback here and can do something with it. So now we've cleaned up our composition script, our first one, which is quite good because I don't want to burn anyone's brain. But it's still going to be a bit tense.
I like that, Thomas. That was good.
Okay, so the payload changed listener. So what does this do? Well, the payload changed listener is triggered every time when the payload is changing that's defined on this particular subcomposition. Which means when I change the name in here, this is called. When I change the last name, it's called. So this is exactly the function which we're going to look at. What I want to do is, because I just noticed it's a bit dark, and I'll just change my editor settings. So change the size a little bit, make the font size bigger, and switch to the light theme. I hope you can see this a little bit better now. So, okay.
Looks good. Looks good.
Now, when developing and working on the composition script, what's always very, very useful, and what's actually your friend, it's the debug console from Chrome. So, and that's what we're going to use now here, a little bit to have a closer look about what actually happens there. So I opened the debug console. Can I change this a little bit? There we go. Scale this a bit and move this a bit here, so we can see better what happens there. So now when I change the name here, add something, I'll get a callback in the console, and that's because there is a console log. It writes the message and the payload into the console. When I change this one, I'll get another log into the console. When we look into that, we'll see more details about the information that's logged. It's the composition name, that's the lower third. There is the composition ID, and then there is the payload. This is the interesting part. So we get the first name, we set it to F. There's the last name, it's set to L, and our HTML text, which is adding, well, a bit, which is a bit disturbing here. We don't need that. We can ignore that for now. But actually, it's good, so we can spy a little bit on it. So
that's the one I had you add in, Thomas, when we did the HTML to sort of throw you for a twist. But you're absolutely right. We don't need it for the purposes of this demo. But actually, it's kind of helpful in some ways.
Yeah, well, I can copy and paste the text, and I don't need to type it.
So, you can thank me later on that one.
Yeah. So now what we're going to do is we're going to identify the code, because within the debug console, I can add stop points to my code, but first I need to locate it. Of course, you can search the files and find it, but the easiest way is use the Control-P and then search for the name of the composition script. And in our case, it's the lower third composition script. So I'll just type in lower third, and there it is. Then I click there, and the browser loads the code, which is actually executed directly into the debug console, and I can add a stop point, which is very, very handy. So I'll do that. I'll do a little change. It executes there. It prints another log message into the console. But we're going to ignore that for now. Using the mouse, when you do a mouse over the elements, you can exactly see what they contain. And that's the composition object. So let's jump into the composition object. So how does it look like? What methods and properties does it have? So there is one property, of course, that's the name and the ID. We know that, and a lot of methods. We're gonna have a look at some of them, not at all of them, but at some of them. So there is the find method, which allows me to find other subcompositions or subcompositions. There's the find widget. We're going to use that later, where we can search for a widget of a specific name. You can get control nodes, data nodes, logic layers. Well, a logic layer, you define that within the composer. There's a model, get model payload. We don't need the model, but what we're going to use is the get payload and the get payload tool. So this allows us to read the payload of control nodes that are defined for these subcompositions. Then there is a jump tool and the play tool. This method, we can use that to control the animation. There is the list compositions. We're going to look at that right now. And well, of course, the set payload. There's a get payload and the set payload. Get payload to get the payload, set payload to update the payload there. Okay, but first let's have a look at the list subcompositions. So how can I test that? I just type it there into the console, list subcompositions, and what it returns is an empty array. That's, of course, it's an empty array because my lower third doesn't have any subcompositions. So it's different when I just look at the parent. So the parent, for example, I can access it with composition parent, and with composition parent list subcompositions, I'll get an array, and within this array there is one element, and that's my lower third. Why do I show that? I show that to you because when you search for a subcomposition, the find function always returns an array, because you can have multiple subcompositions with the same name in your composition, and that's of course for the designer it might be handy. But for the composition script, you need to be able to identify the right one. So it's always a good practice to use unique composition names and unique widget names for those compositions and widgets that you control from your script. So that's important to understand and important to keep in mind. So now there is the parent. Now let's have another look. Let's have a look at the parent of the parent. And of course, it doesn't exist because the parent is the most top composition, and it doesn't have a parent. That's why it returns undefined. So now what we're going to look at is get payload and the control node content on this composition. Let's get payload, go. Get payload returns 3 items, and it's an array with 3 elements, and it's a key value pair where the first one is the ID of the control node, and the second one is the value of it. Then the second get payload to function, it returns also the content of the control node, but as a JSON structure. And that's much easier, much more handy in JavaScript to handle. Because when you want to access, for example, just the first name, you just use first name, and you directly can access the property. So you will see me using the GetPayload tool most of the time. There are only a few cases where I'll use the GetPayload. And of course, when there is a GetPayload, we also can set the payload. Here's the SetPayload. What does it take? The GetPayload function takes a JSON, and it takes a JSON of the same structure as you receive with the GetPayload. So let's set the first name, and I'll set the first name to Thomas. Well, I could set the last name as well, but I only set the first name, which is easy possible. There we go. And that's now interesting because I changed the payload. This also triggered the payload changed event, which then directly logs and the payload into the console. There we see the payload has changed and the first name was switched to Thomas. So that's already pretty good. So now we know how to get the payload and how to set the payload. What else do we need? We want to modify this widget. And so we need to access this widget. And when we look at the methods again, there is a find widget method, which I can use. But of course, I need to know the name of the widget. And I called it text. Okay. So this is what we're going to use. We're going to find a widget and search for the widget called text. And again, what we get an array because, well, text is the default name when you add a text widget to your composition. We didn't change it, so it easily can happen that you have multiple text widgets, then it returned by the find widget call, which makes it difficult to identify that one that you actually want to modify. In our case, we only have one. But it's also a good practice to keep in mind, use unique names for all widgets and all subcompositions you refer to within your composition script. So, and what we're going to do is call this is my widget. And I find the text widget again. And what I'll do here is I'll just save it into a variable. And what I'll do, because I know it's the first widget that I want to access, or the first element within the array. So I'll take the first element, and now my VI, my widget, has all the widget object with all the widget properties and methods. There is only one property, which is the ID. We don't need that today, but we're going to use the GetPayload and the SetPayload methods. So with the visit method GetPayload, we get access to all the properties that we can set on the text widget. And that's, of course, a lot. There is the letter spacing, let's hide. I'm not going to go through all of them. We're going to look to that one, which we actually want to modify, and that's the text here. So, and that's what we're going to do right now. So with the, instead of get payload, I'll set the payload. And this again takes a JSON. My key is called text. So that's the property which is listed there. And I'm going to set the text to, let's say, hello and welcome. Now when I set the text, you'll directly see that the text in the widget is being updated, and we can modify using this command whatever we want within this text widget. Of course, what we're going to do is we construct within the script it look nice and achieve the result that we want to achieve. So with this command, we have now all the tools to finish our little project and finally build it. Okay, let's go back to the composition script editor. So the first thing that we need is we want to have access to our widget. And so what I do here is I define that's my, let's call it the widget.
Is Travis here?
Did we lose Travis?
We're back.
Yeah, I still see him. Was I typing too fast?
Wow, that was technical difficulties, but we came back.
We're
We're
back.
good?
Oh, yeah.
Everything looks good?
Yeah, we didn't miss a beat.
Okay, good.
Okay, where did you lose me?
Only about like 10 seconds ago, Thomas.
Ah, okay, so good. Yeah, well, this was the 10 seconds I needed to write this command. And what this does, just to recap, we define a variable and search in our composition using defined widget method for the widget called text. We remember this is returning an array, and we know we only have one and want to take the first element in the array. So that's how we define that. Just put the 0 in the brackets. So now the next step, what we're going to do is we want the payload, because that's what we need and where we get the content for our text from. So how do we do that? And where do we define that? Well, first I start defining that within this callback function, so that every time when a character is entered first, this callback is triggered and we can update the text. So that's why I defined it in here. So let me define a variable, get the payload, and this is what I'll do is I'll get payload 2. There we go. So this is what I prefer. Then from this payload, I'll get the first name, and the first name is then payload.firstname. This is the key and the ID of this field. And we're gonna do the same here. So that's my last name. I get the last name there, and that's all what I need. There we go.
Hey, Thomas, I got an idea. Would you mind just jumping over to the composition real quick? Because when you brushed over the ID, click on the in the control nodes, for getting the IDs. I think this is the key here. You didn't see Thomas create this piece. He created it, but you didn't see this dialog box. This is imperative, because the ID is what he's referring to. The title below it, that's what you're going to see in Studio or in a control application in Singular. That's why we have 2 of them. So for example, the upper ID is going to be, for example, most of the time we're going to be working in camel case when you're doing program. Not entirely, but that's why we have a different, the ability to identify the control nodes via ID or title. You can even get rid of that HTML text if you want. Now that might confuse a little bit. Actually, do that. Go ahead and delete that one, and now go back over to the composition script and do a refresh, and people can see how.
Before I do a refresh, I save it.
Oh, there you go. Actually, I'm glad I interjected there, because people can see you do need to save right here. Yeah. So if he tries to refresh, there you go. Refresh. There you go.
Yeah, after
now
the refresh, this is gone.
That control node, the HTML one, is now missing, because what structurally happens when Thomas does that refresh, the composition gets loaded. The composition is a JSON file. It gets loaded into the composition script editor is where Thomas, that's why you saw the control node disappear.
Yeah. Why do you need the refresh? Well, we did that. We designed it this way so that the designer can work on the composition at the same time a developer can work on the composition script. And well, when working on as long as working on the composition script, the composition within there stays consistent and doesn't change all the time back and forth. In the upcoming version, what you'll notice in your dashboard is that now you'll see two name indications within the dashboard. The first one is showing the name of who is editing the composition in the composer. The second one, who is editing the composition within the scripting editor. What I've also did, it's while the HTML control node disappeared because we've deleted it, and I changed the names here. So this is what I want to point out, because this can be pretty tricky. I usually keep the name and the IDs the same. For sending data to the control nodes, you need to use the ID instead of the name. The name is, as Stephen said, for the operator in Studio. And for accessing the data, you always need to use the ID there. Okay, so there we go. Then we'll add, let's continue there. We have our payload. We'll get the first name, the last name. And what we'll do is, well, let's say that's the output text. And what the output text shows, it's, well, it's the first name, then add a space in between, and then we say that's the last name. So within this variable, now we have the content of both fields and add just a space in between. Okay, and now we're gonna set the text within with the text widget. And the way we do that is just use the widget text method that's called SetPayload. And we set the text property there. The text property, it's called text. It's a lowercase. I need to be careful. And then what we're going to set there is the output text. There is, by the way, there is a very nice nice feature there. So when you need to align or to clean up the composition form or the script formatting a little bit, you can use this button here, and this cleans up the composition formatting, the composition script format. Sorry. Okay, so now what we've done is when we change the payload, which means when we enter some data in there, we'll get the payload, get the first name, the last name, add both into the output text, and update the text in the widget. So let's have a try. There we go. Oh, I'm happy it works. And then that's the last one. Yeah, sometimes you do some typos, and then you need to search for that. So this is good. It works on the first time. Now comes the easy part, because we just have to add the HTML tags in here. And well, this, how we do it, there are various ways, various options to do that. Well, I'll use the single quotes there, and then type in the HTML open tag. Then we had, well, actually what I can do is, now we've deleted it. Now it would be,
oh no,
useful. Okay, it doesn't matter. What do we have with this span? And within the span, we used the style, and the style was defining the background let's set a fixed color. Let's take crimson. And then we had the padding. And the padding was, this I remember, it was 0 pixels and 40 pixels. There we go, then close this one. Now it gets pretty long. Let's just continue in the next line. What do we need to do? Okay, no, that's actually good for the first part. Then we have the first name. Then there we have the bold tag, and at the end, oh yeah, we're almost done. We close the bold tag, and then we need to close the span, and we need at the end to close the HTML. Okay, let me check. HTML open tag, close tag, span open close tag, style is equals the background color, set it to crimson, which is a red, defining the padding. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Okay, let's give it a try. I'll save it, and now I'll just add a couple of dots there. There we go. So this looks already pretty neat. Well, I can change the color. Let's take something like this and change it. Now it's this kind of yellow or gold, which is perfect. We are almost done. There's only one little issue with the way we wrote our script. And the issue is that our script code only is called when there is a change in the payload. But when you load the overlay, for example, in your output, there is no change. But you still want to have it showing the right thing. So what you need to do is we need to also update and execute this code right when loading the overlay. And the way we do that is we'll just define a function and let me call this function update, and then copy this entire code here, put it there. Oh, let's reformat it a little bit nicer. We don't put this one. And then we need to call this function. I can call it right here, because now what happens is the init function is called, the widget, the text widget is initialized, then this update function is defined, the update function is called, this is reading the payload which we've defined here right on the load, and now we also take this function and copy it down there, so that this also is called, because it's the same on the change of the payload. And here we are. Now when I change the color, again back to, let's say, to crimson, when I save it, crimson, so there's a typo. I already get the update when loading and refreshing the composition. And now, my friends, this is the simple use case and short introduction into composition scripts. There's only one thing we need to do is take this, load it into a control app, like into Studio, and check if it works there as well. So there is my lower third. I'll just have it here. There are my my control nodes. I'll enter there's my Thomas, there is my Molden. So this looks nice. And when I update it, it's also there. I can add another one, can duplicate it and say that's Stephen. Bold. When I update it, here we go. So it updates the content, it changes the length, and we are ready to go.
It's really cool, Thomas. I mean, effectively what Thomas has done is he's wrapped the data entry from a control node, picked up the data from the control node, and then wrapped it in HTML. And the only property within the text widget that we're dealing with is the text property. And we use the word text quite a bit in this demonstration. We named the widget text in the composition tree. We are using the text widget and we're controlling the text property within the text widget. So a little confusing, but as you say here where Thomas is pointing, that is the text property of the text widget. And we just try to keep it as simple as we could. And the name of what we looked for in the tree is text as well. One more thing, Thomas, if you look in the chat window, I dropped in this one's for Travis before we wrap this up. See that Dodger blue? I know he won the World Series with his Dodgers, so I have to do this for Travis. Take that color and let's finish this off with Dodger blue, because Dodger blue, I did not know this, is an actual HTML defined color, or it should be.
Oh.
It's saved.
Oh,
There
yeah.
it is.
There it is.
See? You see that? I had to throw that in for you, Travis, because I ran into that the other day. Now, you know which team I rode for. I won't talk about that right now, but there's not a my team color. So you got a special little, maybe they did that because they won the World Series, but you could, yeah.
That's cool.
I would say that quite a bit, we went over quite a bit. I will just sort of tease a next version of this where I would like to dive in with Thomas and talk more about the global scripts and being able to reference global scripts using the context function that Thomas referred to briefly, where you can do an amazing amount of powerful things. For example, type in your try code for your team and we can grab the data from the global script, populate colors, populate logos, populate team names, and so forth. So that maybe is for the next time we dive into composition scripts. But I think, Thomas, this is an involved piece to the puzzle, incredibly powerful. I think you did a really good job going over all the pieces, because we all scratch our head, how are we going to get this kind of functionality out to our user base? And I think you did a great job. This is a perfectly, very usable example as well. And I'm sure Catherine will make this available on the marketplace, I would assume, and people can get access to the script itself. Because the script itself, once it's boiled down, as Thomas can jump over there, it's not overly complicated. I mean, you spend some time with this, and myself, as not a programmer, not a scripter, I'm able to manipulate this and manipulate specifically, I've spent some time manipulating the HTML, increasing the padding. I think we've got the padding set to 20, if I'm not mistaken, or 10. 40, sorry. So again, that could be exposed to a control node where you could be adjusting the padding, for example, from within Singular. So I say with the color as well, which gets a little more complicated, but not overwhelming. I think it's, Travis, you can thank me later for that Dodger blue.
Hey, do we have any questions coming in, or Travis? No. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there is a lot more which you can do with inline styles.
It's endless.
Because now we have a solid color, of course. If you want to define a gradient, you can define a gradient using standard CMS gradient. Let's take the linear gradient. Let's put the brackets around there, and then we'll define, let's say, go from crimson to there.
I would go from orange to black. I don't know why, but maybe I think that might be kind of cool. What do you think, Travis?
Let's say this is 90 degrees. And
I think what Thomas is doing real quick as he's typing, I will just say that he's using standard which is, that's the beauty of this whole platform. I mean, these composition scripts are built in JavaScript, and we're using standard CSS. So this isn't something we came up with, this syntax. This is, this is the backbone of the web, we'll call it, the CSS, HTML, and there you go.
Not the colors you wanted, but pretty.
Not the colors I wanted, but hey.
Okay, well, we can go from crimson to black.
Close.
Well,
I mean, but you can't even see the black. No, put it back.
If
Put
we
it
do
back.
type in orange there, for example, but listen, that's for another one. I think you basically
From orange to Dodge blue.
Yeah, there you go. So, you can see where this goes. I mean, this goes into everything from, you could do a grading on the text itself. I mean, you could apply shadows and the distance of the shadows and all the various things that you can do in CSS. So the sky's the limit. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't put all of these types of controls by default into the Singular UI. Otherwise, it would be beyond usable. So we give you a bunch of the tools that you need in our text widget, quite a bit, and then you can extend it using CSS like Thomas is doing here until you're seeing blue, right, Travis?
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, we are preparing a number of example composition scripts. So when you have an idea and like what you see, and would like to have more examples or very specific examples, well, leave a note in the comments or send an email to us, or open a ticket on the support portal, and we are happy to address those ideas, those requests, and publish them in the Singular Marketplace.
I think this was great. Catherine, can you think of anything else? Are we good?
No, I think this is good. We're going to have to decide what our next live stream is going to be. So if you guys, want to comment, if you have any suggestions, if you want to go deeper into the composition script, we can do that. But other than that, I think we've covered a lot today. So
yeah, very helpful, Thomas. And this is this relationship between the composition script and the composition itself, the ability to have two people. In some cases, I know that you and I do this quite a bit, and I know you do this with Suzanne, where one of us is in the composition, the other one is in the script, and we can really make some powerful overlays using this architecture. It's absolutely amazing the way that our team has set up this architecture. It's just incredible. So I enjoyed it. I learned some things, and I think we're done. I think we've wrapped up. So I would say thanks for watching. Catherine, we'll put on our Thomas, I like your hat, by the way. And we'll put our thinking caps together. And again, like Thomas said, give us any feedback and stuff. If there's certain topics and things you want us to discuss, do live streams on, we're happy to jump in and do that, and give us the feedback. Is really, really great. So I think that's it. Thank you for watching.
thanks, guys.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Bye for now.